This is my story straight from California. That night my son's text appeared, "You won't be joining us. My wife wants this vacation to be just her family. You've already done your part by paying, so we're going ahead." I froze the travel fund before takeoff. They boarded the plane. The message hit me like a cold splash of water. "You should understand your place," it practically said. "My wife prefers to keep the vacation only for her family. You've done enough by paying." It arrived at exactly 11:02 p.m., 2 nights before the family trip I had spent 3 years planning, saving for, and imagining in every detail. I was sitting at the kitchen table, my reading glasses sliding down my nose, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the quiet. I had just finished stuffing the last travel-size sunscreen bottles into neatly labeled zippered bags, one for each grandchild. My fingers were sticky with tape from wrapping little souvenir bags, each filled with tiny aloha keychains and a note saying, "Grandma loves you." Then the phone buzzed again. Another message. "Don't take it personally, Mom. It's just simpler this way." I didn't reply. I stared at the glowing screen until it went dark, then placed it face down on the table. No call. No thank you. Not even a hint of kindness disguised as a lie. Just a quiet, cold reshuffling of family, a reminder that the woman who had raised him, me, was no longer part of that circle. I'd sensed things changing for a while. It wasn't just the way Tanya, my daughter-in-law, corrected me in front of the children or rolled her eyes at stories from my honeymoon with my late husband. It wasn't even that she began hosting holidays at her mother's house without telling me until the day before. No. The true sign was the way she looked past me. Not through me but past me, like a waitress who had already dropped the check and moved on. Still, I never thought Nathan would go along with it. He had once written me Mother's Day cards that brought me to tears. He used to bring me pink tulips every March, even after moving across the country. When he was little, he told his teachers I was his best friend. I still had the drawing he made in 2nd grade, me with a cape captioned, "My Mom Saves the Day." Apparently, I was no longer part of that story. I glanced at the small duffel bag I had packed, 2 sundresses I hadn't worn in years, a photo of my late husband that I planned to set on the dinner table that night, and a small box of matches for a candle we would have lit in his memory. The candle was lavender, his favorite scent. I had imagined all of us standing barefoot on the sand as the sun dipped into the ocean. I pictured my grandson clutching my hand and asking, "Did Grandpa love the beach too?" And I would have said he loved it enough to bring me here before we could afford it. He loved it more because he shared it with me. But that vision wouldn't come true now because I wasn't invited. That I had covered every detail of that trip. The beachfront villa? Paid. Flights? Booked. Airport transfers, luau tickets, snorkeling lessons, breakfast baskets? All arranged. I had spent countless hours on the phone with a travel agent, making sure the beds were soft enough for the kids, the walkways flat enough for Tanya's mother's troublesome knee. Every little thing had been thought of. No. I was nothing more than a line item someone had crossed off. The ATM that had wired the money now erased from the plan, quietly forgotten. I sat in the kitchen for what felt like hours. The clock crept toward midnight. The house was dark, silent, but I didn't bother to turn on the lights. I let the soft under-cabinet glow stretch long shadows across the counters I'd scrubbed just hours before. For a fleeting moment I felt something I didn't expect. Shame. Not anger. Not sorrow. Just that quiet, gnawing shame that makes you feel foolish for ever hoping. I thought about calling him. I even picked up the phone. But what would I even say? That hurts. "He knows you've changed. Please let me come." I couldn't bring myself to beg, not after all I had poured into this. I set the phone down. Instead, I rose slowly, walked to my desk in the den and powered on my old laptop. It blinked awake, slow but familiar. I opened the folder I had labeled Hawaii Travel Fund. There it was, in black and white, $21,763.84, the sum I had been building since the day I retired. It had started with $10 bills tucked carefully into envelopes. I remembered selling old furniture, tutoring English online at night, every single dollar going into this dream. I had linked the travel fund to cover villa payments, airline tickets, and every planned service. I had set it all to pull from my account, trusting them, because I believed trust was something I had earned. The cursor blinked at me. I hovered over the button labeled Freeze Account. One click and all payments would halt. One call to the travel agency and everything would stop. I didn't click. Not yet. Instead, I opened a blank document and started typing something else. Not a message to Nathan, not a plea. A list. A new list of women I knew from church. Women who hadn't left the state in 20 years. There was Carol, whose son hadn't spoken to her since she got cancer. Louise, who buried her husband last fall yet still carried his photo to Bible study. Frances, who helped raise her grandkids but wasn't invited to their graduations. Beverly, who told me last month that no one had ever taken a photo of her on the beach. I saved the file. Then I returned to the bank page. I clicked freeze. A small box appeared. Are you sure you want to pause all linked transactions? Yes. Another warning. All linked cards will be disabled immediately. Yes. I exhaled, closed the laptop, and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I picked up the little souvenir bag I had made for my youngest grandson. I placed the keychain gently on the table. One by one I unwrapped the others. And for the first time in 3 years, I let myself imagine a different kind of trip. One where I wasn't unwanted, one where I wasn't a burden or an afterthought. One where I was the host, in charge of joy and laughter. And I smiled. Not from spite, not revenge, but from something stronger. Clarity. It all began with a jar. An old mason jar I kept tucked behind a flower in the kitchen cabinet. I called it my dream jar, though no one else ever knew. Every time I skipped buying something small, a bottle of vitamins, a movie rental, a new pair of house shoes, I'd take that cash and slip it into the jar. At first it was barely anything. $5 here, a few coins there. But over time it grew quietly, patiently, like hope always does. 3 years I saved. I canceled my cable. I stopped buying my favorite tea. I tutored students online for extra income, even on nights my joints ached and my eyes burned. I turned down the heat at night, wore extra socks, declined lunch invitations from friends, telling them I had a tight month. None of them knew that every penny I spared was going into that jar. For what? For a memory. For one last beautiful moment as a family. Hawaii wasn't just a place. It was a symbol. James and I had gone there for our honeymoon, barely 24, freshly married and broke as could be. We shared one suitcase, split our sandwiches at lunchtime. He got sunburned so badly on the second day that he wrapped a bedsheet around himself like a cape for the rest of the week. We laughed so hard, so freely, more than we ever would again. After he died, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would take the family there. I would let the grandkids see what he had seen, let Nathan feel the sand his father once walked on. Maybe it would reconnect us. Maybe it would remind him of where he came from and who had loved him first. So I planned. I researched villas that could fit all 9 of us. I called the travel agent over and over, asking about bed arrangements, dietary needs, wheelchair access for Tanya's mother. I ordered custom t-shirts with everyone's name and family is forever 2023 printed across the front. I chose a beachfront home with a fire pit. I pictured us gathered around it, lighting candles one by one, each of us saying a word to describe James. I would hold his photo, the one of him laughing, head thrown back, sun in his hair, while we all shared something good. I imagined silence, then tears, then laughter. Mostly I imagined being seen, being thanked, being held. None of that happened. Somewhere along the way I stopped being part of the picture. And I don't just mean the metaphorical picture. I mean literally. Slowly I noticed it, fewer group photos. At Thanksgiving Tanya would say, "Let's do one of just the kids." Then, one with just our little family unit. By the time they finished there was never a photo with me. Christmas they all wore matching sweaters, red with white trees. Mine was blue. I hadn't even known there was a plan. Nathan would brush it off. "Oh, you're not into that stuff, Mom." But I was. I just wasn't asked. Tanya took over birthdays, hosted everything at her mother's house. I was invited, yes, but I felt like a guest. Once she told someone, "Nathan's mom is here too." As if I had wandered in uninvited. And she always smiled, polite, harmless, though harm doesn't always come with yelling. Sometimes it comes quietly, through exclusion, omission, being left out of every photo, every story, every seat at the table. But still I planned. I held on because I believed this trip would bring us back together. I imagined us all beneath that Hawaiian sky, waves whispering at the shore, children squealing in the sand, and maybe, just maybe, love would be enough to remind them of us. That was the story I told myself. That dream, built quietly from tiny sacrifices over years, shattered with a single text. A 3-year dream reduced to a 3-second dismissal. "You've already done your part by paying." Suddenly, every skipped tea, Every freezing night, every tutoring session spent squinting at a screen felt pointless. I hadn't been building a bridge. I'd been building a pedestal they never intended to climb. I thought of the candles I'd packed, of the moment I had imagined us holding hands by the fire. But the truth hit me like a wave crashing against jagged rocks. They didn't want my stories. They didn't want my memories. They only wanted my money. And now that they had it, they wanted me gone. That night, I went to the closet, unpacked my bag and placed the lavender candle beside James's photo on the table. Then I sat in the quiet, asking myself a question no mother should ever have to ask. When did I become a burden in the family I built? The morning after the text, I woke earlier than usual. Not because I had anywhere to go but because sleep had abandoned me. His words echoed in my mind. Not his voice, just the words. You've already done your part by paying. I moved through the house like a ghost, folding the same blanket twice, straightening picture frames that were already straight, wiping counters that were already spotless. Silence clung to me, humming in the walls, heavy and persistent. That afternoon I opened my email to check a grocery receipt, and there it was. Subject line: Final attorney. How a family passage. Sent from the travel agency. Without thinking I clicked it. A full breakdown. Flight schedules, villa check-in times, excursions, dinner reservations, rental cars. Everything I had spent months arranging. I scrolled slowly, searching for some sign of what I already knew but didn't want to admit. 8 names. Nathan, Tanya, their 2 kids, Tanya's parents, Tanya's sister, her sister's boyfriend. Not mine. Not me. 8 plane tickets, 8 villa registrations, 8 confirmations. I was not one of them. I hovered over the mouse, then zoomed in, hoping against hope. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I was under guest 9. Maybe they'd added me separately. Maybe. But no attachments, no side bookings, no extra confirmations, just 8. I sat frozen for a long moment, then gently closed the laptop like it might shatter if I moved too fast. That evening Tanya called. Not Nathan. Tanya. Her voice was overly cheerful. We're just wrapping up packing, she chirped. I hope everything's set on your end money-wise. The final payment hits tomorrow, right? I didn't respond immediately. Then softly I asked, is there anything you need me to bring? Pause. A sharp, awkward silence. Bring? She repeated. Then, oh no, you don't need to bring anything. I pushed a little further, thinking maybe I could offer games for the kids or snacks for the flight. She cut me off, still smiling, but now there was steel in her voice. Marilyn, we've got it all handled. You really don't need to worry. In fact, we thought it might be best if you took this trip to rest. Stay home. Focus on you. Her words weren't cruel, but the finality hit like a stone. They had planned everything with me deliberately excluded, and now they pretended it was for my own good. After the call ended, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the bird bath James had installed 20 years ago. The water was still, not a ripple, just like me. Not angry. Not shocked. Just still. I walked to the closet, pulled down my small fireproof lockbox and opened it. Inside were the documents I had kept since opening the travel fund. The account I had created. The account I had funded. The account tied to every single booking. I flipped through the forms until I saw it, bold and undeniable. Account holder, Marilyn Rose Monroe. Authorized users? None. No co-signers. No shared ownership. No alternate access. I sat down, opened my banking app, and there it was. Travel fund $21,763.84. 84 cents. Status, active. Linked cards, 6. Primary billing owner, me. That's when I realized how easily they had erased me, how confidently they had treated my generosity as their entitlement and discarded my presence as if it were a burden. I was never meant to go. They only wanted the money. This had never been our vacation. It had been a transaction and I had been the bank. But banks can close. I didn't make any decisions that night. I turned off my phone, made a cup of peppermint tea and just sat with it. I let myself feel everything fully, not just the insult but the clarity. They hadn't forgotten me. They had intentionally omitted me. And worse, they assumed I would be passive, too old, too grateful for crumbs to notice. They thought I'd stay in the shadows and smile anyway. They forgot who raised them. I closed the app and for the first time in months I slept through the night. No yelling. No crying. No dramatic calls or explosive accusations. Just tea. The chair James used to call the lookout. I stared out the window while my laptop blinked awake beside me. The house was quiet. No TV. No radio. Just the wind tapping against the panes and the occasional hum of the fridge. And in that silence, something inside me settled. Not calm but like stone. I was no longer confused. I was no longer waiting for an apology. I was planning. I opened the banking app again and scrolled to the travel fund section. My name was still there at the top. Account owner. I checked the 6 linked cards. 1 for the resort, 1 for the car rental, 1 for the airline, 3 for incidentals, food, excursions, entertainment, all set to draw from my fund automatically. I clicked the settings tab. There it was. Transaction lock/freeze mode. I hovered over the toggle. A note beneath it read, activate this setting to pause all outgoing charges from this account. Linked cards will be disabled. No new charges can be authorized without account owner verification. 1 click. That was all it would take. But I didn't click yet. Instead, I opened another tab, my calendar, and marked the departure day with a red circle. They were scheduled to leave LAX at 10:45 a.m. local time. If they arrived 2 hours early for check-in, I'd want the freeze to begin around 8:15 a.m. Right as they queued at the gate, confident that everything had been paid for. That would be the moment the card stopped working. So, I didn't press the button. Not yet. Because once you decide to stop playing the role everyone assigns you, the perfect mother, the generous grandmother, the smiling supporter who never asks for anything in return, there's no going back to that mask. And I wanted to be sure. So I gave them one last chance. Just one. I sent a simple, soft message to Nathan. Me. Let me know if you'd like any help with the kids' bags or snacks before the trip. I can bring extra motion sickness bands for Olivia. No reply. An hour passed. I could see that the message had been read. Still nothing. No thank you. No acknowledgement. No, we appreciate you. Just silence. That was when I knew there was no misunderstanding. This wasn't about forgetfulness, miscommunication, or Tanya's preferences. This was entitlement. The quiet cruelty of people who think love is a one-way transaction. I had been the vault and they had been cashing out. But not anymore. I returned to the banking app. My finger hovered, then without hesitation I clicked. The icon turned blue. Freeze mode activated. All transactions are now paused. Manual authorization required to resume. Done. I stared at the screen, letting it sink in. There would be no confirmation emails, no alerts, no warnings. They would discover the truth the same way I had discovered I wasn't invited. In the most silent, undeniable way possible. I leaned back in my chair, sipped my tea and exhaled. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. A reality they chose, but that didn't mean I had to fund it. Over the next 48 hours I said nothing. When Tanya posted a photo of matching beach hats on social media, I didn't comment. When Nathan texted the family group chat with a final ready for takeoff, I didn't respond. And when my youngest granddaughter sent me a voice note saying, "Grandma, we're going to see sea turtles," I pressed it to my heart and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby, but someone had to teach your parents the value of presence." Then I returned to my laptop and opened a new spreadsheet. This time it wasn't for them. It was for me. I made a list titled Those Who Deserve to Be Seen. At the top, Carol, Beverly, Louise, Frances, Nora, Denise. Each name belonged to a woman like me. Overlooked, underestimated, overused. Beneath each, I began mapping what a vacation could look like. Not for reward but for restoration. Not out of pity but out of power. If I was going to hold the checkbook, I would decide who was worth the trip. That night, I slept with the window open. The wind whispered like a secret finally spoken. They had their bags packed, boarding passes in hand. They thought the only thing left was the flight. But flights run on more than fuel, they run on trust. And they had none left with me. They left for the airport with matching luggage, straw hats, and that soft, smug air people wear when they think everything has gone exactly according to plan. Tanya posted a photo from the back seat of the Uber. The kids grinning. Nathan flashing a peace sign. Her caption read, "Off to paradise, family only." The last words cut like glass. I saw it while sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug I'd owned since before Nathan was born. The same mug he once used to serve me breakfast in bed when he was 9. That I didn't like what I felt, but I didn't look away. I watched their story unfold frame by frame like a slow-motion movie. At the airport, at check-in, at the gate. Luggage stacked, kids bouncing with excitement. Tanya's mother posed beside the airline sign as if it were a red carpet. 8 smiling faces. No seat for me. Then the messages started. Nathan, hey. Getting weird error at check-in. Can you check the travel account real quick? I didn't reply. 5 minutes passed. Then another. Nathan, they're saying the card was declined multiple times. You see anything on your end? So I said nothing. Then the calls began. At first, one every 10 minutes. Then every 5. Then back to back. Voicemails piled up. Mom, it's me. Just give me a quick call, please. Okay, I'm not sure what's going on, but we can't get the rental confirmed. It's saying funds unavailable. Can you look? Mom, please. The kids are freaking out. Just tell me if something happened to the account. I kept the phone face down. The clock read 8:27 a.m. The flight was scheduled for 10:45 a.m. I pictured them at the counter scanning and rescanning those plastic cards. Tanya grew more frantic with each beep of denial. Her parents muttered questions under their breath, sharp and clipped. Nathan sweat, pretending he still had control. Then came a voicemail with a new tone. A low, urgent whisper. Mom, I don't know what you did, but if this is because of the text, can we please talk? No apology. No admission. Just an attempt to negotiate now that their plan had collapsed. And still I stayed silent. Next, the resort reached out, not to my phone but via email. Subject line. Booking cancellation request confirmed. Dear Miss Monroe, we have processed the requested cancellation of your villa booking. Due to the account freeze, associated charges have been reversed. As the sole account holder, no further action is required. We hope to welcome you in the future. I read it once. Twice. Then I let out a small, bitter breath of release. They would not be welcomed. Not there, not now. Maybe never. At 10:40 a.m. Nathan texted again. We're boarding. Call me please. But I didn't. They took off with no place to land because money only guarantees a trip when backed by trust. And they had broken theirs. By noon I had over 50 missed calls. From Nathan, from Tanya, even from her mother. I ignored the voicemails. Instead I went for a walk. The air was warm. Birds chirped. A neighbor waved and asked if I had plans for spring break. I smiled. Not yet, but soon. When I returned, the phone had finally stopped ringing. Except for one new message. Nathan, look, if this is about what we said, maybe we messed up. Yeah, I don't know. Things got twisted, but the kids are here. They're excited. We can still fix this. Please just unlock the account. I promise we'll talk everything through when we get back. I stared at the screen. They wanted the vacation and a postponed apology. They wanted forgiveness without ever admitting a mistake. They wanted me to bankroll their joy while erasing mine. So no, I did not unlock the account. I didn't reply. I didn't explain myself. I owed them nothing. Sometimes silence is the only answer loud enough to make an impact. 2 days after their flight, the refund began to roll in. Small notifications, one after another. First the resort. Then the rental car company. Airline taxes and fees. Tour packages. Private chef deposit. The luau. Snorkeling excursions. All of it returned. All reversed. All mine again. My travel fund, once emptied by misplaced love, was full once more. But this time love would not be blind. This time I would spend it differently. Not for appearances. Not for people who saw me only as a wallet with wrinkles. This time I would spend it on those who understood the true value of memory. Women who had given without being seen, who had lived lives of quiet devotion. I opened my notebook, the same one I had used to jot down James' favorite songs, his fishing recipes, the names of every grandchild. I flipped to a clean page and wrote 3 words at the top. The Forgotten Women. Beneath it I began a list. Carol from church, a widow whose children hadn't visited in 5 Christmases. Frances, still wearing her wedding ring even though her husband had left her 30 years ago. Beverly, who cared for a brother with dementia, sleeping on a cot beside his hospital bed. Nora, who once said to me, the worst part of old age isn't the pain, it's the invisibility. Lucille, my retired neighbor, a librarian who had never seen the ocean. And Di, who had once driven me to the clinic when I twisted my ankle and refused to let me repay her. I made 6 phone calls. Each conversation followed the same rhythm. Hesitant hellos, stunned silence, disbelief. You want to take me where? Hawaii. For 1 week. No catch. But why me? Because someone should. Because you matter. I made the bookings under my name this time. 1 villa, 6 women, 7 days. No tags. No hashtags. No family-only captions. I called the travel agent and gave her their names, asked for separate beds, and one large table so we could all sit together every night. Then I went to the box beneath my bed. Inside was the photo of James the first had planned to place at the head of our family table. His smile was still strong. Still mischievous. Still mine. I had it enlarged and framed, not in gold but in soft walnut, the kind of wood that darkens and deepens with age. I wrapped it in bubble wrap and tucked it carefully into my suitcase. When we arrived at the villa, a place perched above the ocean where palm trees swayed like dancers in slow motion, and the salt air kissed your skin before you knew it, I carried James' photo through the front door and placed it on the dining table. No one questioned it. No one asked me to move it aside. It simply belonged there at the center of our gathering. That night we sat together under hanging lights. The sound of waves whispered through open doors. Carol wore a bright scarf and refilled everyone's wine glass with a practiced cheerfulness. Beverly toasted to finally being somewhere she didn't have to tidy up after herself. Frances cried when she saw the view from her window. We didn't talk about who had forgotten us. We talked about who we remembered. We didn't compare scars. We shared the strength that had grown beneath them. And James, my James, watched it all from the center of the table, his smile never fading. Each night we lit a single candle beside his photo. Each woman spoke aloud one thing they wished someone had told them when they were 30. I see you. You're allowed to rest. You don't have to earn love. Your story matters. You are not a burden. You are never invisible. On the last night, we walked along the shore in silence. The stars hovered close as if you could tuck one into your pocket. The water curled around our ankles. The moon silvered every wrinkle, every curve, every scar. I looked around at the women beside me, women who had given without asking, loved without limit, endured without applause. And then it hit me. I hadn't just taken them on vacation. I had brought them home, to each other, to themselves, to the reminder that memory, when shared with the right people, becomes more than a flash in time. It becomes legacy. 3 days after we returned, an email arrived. I had just returned from a morning walk, the ocean still whispering in my ears. My suitcase lay half unpacked, a half-eaten pineapple in the fridge, and the scent of plumeria clinging to my clothes. I opened my inbox and there it was. Subject: just want to clear the air. Nathan. I stared at it a long moment before clicking. Hi Mom. We're back now. Wasn't quite what we imagined. A lot went wrong obviously, and I guess some of that was our fault. I'm not saying everything was handled perfectly. Maybe things could have been communicated better. Tanya says, hi by the way. She was stressed and didn't mean to exclude you. I think she just wanted the trip to feel a certain way. You know how she is about structure. Anyway, I've been thinking. Maybe we weren't fair. Maybe we messed up, but we're home now and trying to sort through a lot. Honestly, the kids are confused and we're trying to shield them from too much drama. That said, we're in a bit of a bind financially. We had to rebook a bunch of stuff on credit and it's snowballing. So, I just wanted to ask if you're able, could you maybe consider returning the original deposit we gave for the trip, or even part of it? I know you probably feel hurt, but we're still family. Just let me know. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time. Each time my eyes found that one line. Could you maybe consider returning the original deposit? I leaned back in my chair and let the silence settle thick around me. They didn't want acknowledgement. They didn't want healing. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted a refund. They wanted the money back. I thought about that word, deposit, as if they had invested, as if they had contributed to a shared dream. But they had only taken. But they hadn't deposited anything but assumption. Assumption that I would pay. Assumption that I would remain silent. Assumption that I would feel grateful to be included, even on the outskirts. I clicked into the sent items folder and found the original transaction. Every payment had come from my name, my account, my sacrifice. There had been no shared fund, no co-signed contribution, just me. They were asking me to give them my money to cover the cost of their choices. It would have almost been funny if it weren't so familiar, because that's what mothers do, right? Pay the bill. Swallow the insult. Hold the pain. Hand over the blessing. Get erased from the photo, but still remain by the frame. I closed my eyes and pictured the dining table in Hawaii. 6 women laughing, clinking glasses, passing bread. James smiling from the center in his walnut frame. No demands. No expectations. Just presence. Just peace. Then I thought of Nathan's email. The absence of apology, the presence of excuses, the convenient inclusion of Tanya's stress, the vague suggestion that I should just understand. But understanding doesn't mean surrender. Love without respect is not love at all. I reopened the email, hovered over the reply button, and closed it again. There was nothing I needed to say. If someone asks why you won't refund betrayal, the person asking never deserved an explanation in the first place. I folded the laptop shut and went to the kitchen. I poured a glass of iced tea and looked out the window. A bird dipped low across the yard, brushing the wind chime James had bought on our 35th anniversary. It sang a note as light as memory and I smiled. I may not have received a true apology, but I no longer needed one. I had something better, clarity, and I had kept what was mine. I sat on the beach, toes buried in warm, forgiving sand, watching the tide roll in like breath itself. The sky blushed pink, the kind that only appears in postcards or the corners of memories you thought forgotten. Behind me, the villa glowed with the quiet sounds of women laughing, not loudly, not for show, but deep, full, healing laughter. Frances told a story about taking the wrong bus and ending up 3 towns away from her wedding rehearsal. Carol tried to teach Beverly how to hula with a flower tucked behind her ear. Joy sang an old lullaby under her breath. Nora, sweet Nora, wrote a postcard to herself, addressed to the home she said no one had written to in over a decade. I watched them and thought, this is what family looks like when no one is trying to impress anyone. Just presence. Just joy. Just permission to be. It had taken me a long time to understand that love doesn't come with volume. It comes with consistency, with showing up, with listening, with choosing someone even when they are no longer convenient. That night after dinner we gathered outside on the patio. I pulled out the last lavender candle. 6 others were already lit, each one held by a woman carrying a memory, a name, a goodbye they'd never been allowed to say aloud. Now it was my turn. I set James's photo at the center of the table. The women fell silent. I held the matchstick in my hand. This, I said softly, was supposed to be for all of them, for my family. But I think maybe it was always meant for this. I struck the match. The flame flared, then steadied. I lit the candle and watched the wax begin to melt, slow and certain like time itself. Beverly reached over and touched my hand. I didn't think I'd feel this again, she whispered. Peace. Gratitude. Think I mattered. She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes. And I didn't think it would come from someone like you. Someone like me? I asked, smiling. Someone who knows, she said, what it's like to give everything and still be left outside the door. I didn't respond. I just held her hand a little tighter. After the candle burned for a while, I stood and walked down to the edge of the beach. The women followed behind me slowly, barefoot, each carrying a seashell, a ribbon, or a single written name tucked in their pocket. We formed a circle in the sand. No ceremony. No script. Just silence. And then I said it, not to them, not even to James, but to the part of me that had needed to hear it most. I'm not sad anymore. Because I wasn't. I wasn't angry either. I wasn't waiting for Nathan to call. I wasn't hoping Tanya would realize what she'd done. I wasn't holding out for some tearful reunion where everyone finally understood how much I had carried. I had stopped carrying it. For the first time in decades, I felt light. I thought about that email, the calculated attempt to turn apology into negotiation. I thought about the years I spent trying to be enough for people who only saw me when they needed something. And I smiled. Not the kind of smile you wear at family gatherings when you're handed a paper plate and told to sit at the kids' table because there's no more room. No. This was the smile that comes when you realize you were never the problem. You were just giving your best to people who had already decided it wasn't enough. And then the words came, quiet as the wind. Kindness breeds entitlement. So I erased that kindness. And now I owe nothing to anyone. Not because I am bitter, but because I am free. Free from expectations that only ever drained me. Free from the weight of false belonging. Free from the performance of motherhood that demanded constant sacrifice without ever being asked. And what about you? I stood at the shoreline and let the waves come to me. They wrapped around my ankles, pulled at the sand as if saying, let it go. So I did. I let go of the dream of a family that would hold space for me. I let go of the house I helped build but was never welcomed in. I let go of the quiet, endless reaching for approval I had already earned 1,000 times over. And what remained was this: a handful of women, a villa glowing behind us, a husband's smile frozen in a photo, and a heart no longer begging to be seen. I turned back and looked at them, my chosen family, and thought I was never left behind. I simply found the ones who were walking my way. If this story touched something deep in you, if you've ever poured your heart into a family that forgot you, if you've ever been erased and had to write yourself back in, then you belong here. This is Grandma True Stories, where silence becomes strength and memory becomes power. We tell the stories no one else dares to. Of mothers discarded. Of women who endured. Of legacies rebuilt, not with noise but with truth. If you believe kindness isn't weakness but wisdom that waits, if you believe being forgotten isn't the end of your story but the start of a better one, subscribe to Grandma's Honest Stories today. Because when a grandma speaks, the world finally listens.